too. Okay,
No,
perfect. So, I started looking into this, and why don't I do this as well? And mainly for my own sort of peace of mind on all this was that I've accumulated over the course of time a whole lot of information and data and files and books, and have collected from my family artifacts, heirlooms that have stories behind them. And some of those stories aren't written down. Some of them, are written down, but it's not connected to the item itself. So it got me sort of thinking about, and I know it's come up a lot in conversation about, oh, make sure that, we get, your passwords are passed on to your heirs. So I started looking into this, and I think I found out a whole lot for myself, and I thought I was pretty knowledgeable, but I'll just dig in. And, I think it's important, to sort of point out that, without a plan, things that you all have worked on over the course of time may not be as important, or your family may not be as aware of how important something is. And they may unintentionally, throw it away, or, they may not understand that that's the only photograph of X, Y, and Z, and that may not, it may get buried in a pile that eventually gets thrown away. And as I've said to my kids, I do not want to end up in a thrift store. Please do not put me in the photo bin at the thrift store. I said, if there's no interest and nobody wants them, please destroy them. I do not, and I love those photographs. I go through those bins all the time, but I always think to myself, what would that person think if they knew that they were at the, the flea market or the antique mall or wherever? So, without a proper plan, you don't have a lot of control on what happens to it after you're gone. And, you can't take it with you. And that should really resonate when it comes to genealogical materials. And the best thing you can do to protect them is to work on creating some type of legacy plan for your research, your books, your artifacts, your notes, your websites, etc., so that your family understands its importance and what you want to have done with them. I think it's also important to note that you may decide that, you want, when the time is, your family should just simply, like your Facebook page, to close it as opposed to leaving it up. But you got to give instructions, you got to give passwords, you've got to tell them where it is, or it's going to live forever. And sadly, the bad news is that a lot of spammers, we were talking about it earlier, they will take advantage of inactive Facebook accounts and use them for phishing schemes, etc. So always best to sort of try and, get a handle on it. A lot of people say, well, it's a hassle to get a codicil to my will. It's going to cost money, and I will say this, I think sources are split. I did some research on this. Some people were like, oh, absolutely, get a codicil to your will. It's not all that expensive, and it's a very clear delineation of what you want to do with your items. Other people have said codicils maybe not necessary, like a formal legal document, but that you could leave a directive to your executors with all of the specifics you want to address. And where I've landed on this topic is, I think it's best that everybody individually think to themselves what's going to work best for them. If you've got something that you believe, could be mishandled or is too complex, or you want to leave something very specifically to somebody, and it has either great historical or personal value, obviously the best thing to do is to put it in the will, either in the will itself or in a codicil. Letters, directives, very easy, and they're easy to amend. And I think that's also key in all of this is, we're not planning on stopping right now. You know, I'm still doing research. I'm still adding to my collection of things. So the minute I put something into a formal document, it's going to be sort of stale, if you will. So there's, you know, there's going to have to be periodic updates, whereas a letter directive to an executor can be updated really, really quickly and easily. But the best thing to do is to think about your own situation and figure out what works best for you. And right now, I think I'm going in the form of a directive letter, but that could change in time too. Let's see. Oops. Sorry. So when you're building your plan, there's a couple of things, you know, and some of these caught me off guard. I mean, obviously, when we think about putting together a genealogical plan, we think about heirlooms and artifacts, you know, photos and the documents that we've collected over time, you know, birth certificates and, you know, wills and, I mean, you know, you name it, family Bibles. But we've also collected genealogical and history books, some of them out of print, some of them very hard to find. We have all this research data that may not have made it into a tree, or it could be in a note within the tree or somewhere in a hard copy file. And then we certainly have all been using technology tools. We use, you know, Word and probably Excel spreadsheets. We use, you know, all sorts of genealogical apps. We are also on websites like ancestry.com and Family Search. So you've got to think about, you know, these topics and then think about what you have. And sometimes it can kind of be a daunting task. I'm still trying to deal with all the photographs, but, you know, it can't be done overnight, but I'm definitely trying to get that in line. That's probably my largest area that just, I got photographs from my mother and my grandmother and my grandparents, and none of them are very well documented. So that's my challenge. So, you know, in looking at other people's plans and what they're sort of suggesting to do, I think you know, creating an inventory. And the best way to sort of start with that is to create like a spreadsheet and, you know, have certain columns. What is the item? Where is it? You know, and what you would like to see have done with it. And then I have a couple of extra spaces on the side, you know, to indicate, you know, did I contact that person? Are they interested in it? If they're not interested in it, then I need to go to a plan B. You know, and all of those notes are there because if nothing else, it's going to be the breadcrumbs that the executor will follow in honoring your wishes. So, you know, there's probably, you know, two distinct types. There's physical materials, you know, the heirlooms, keepsakes, family trees, photos, and original documents. And then there's digital accounts, and that's online subscriptions and the cloud storage. And, you know, it's going to be really key when we start talking a bit more about digital materials, URLs, passwords, also, you know, just everything you can to give, you know, your heir a pathway to get it accomplished. Because I'll give you an example. My father is still living, but he is incapacitated. And we were not necessarily aware of just how incapacitated he was. So what happened was his email accounts went inactive. He had some banking and stock and, you know, you name it. And what I've had to do, and I have power of attorney, which is also key, but it's been 2 years since I've been trying to get certain places to honor my power of attorney. I have a durable power of attorney. And it's frustrating. You know, that is you know, my father absolutely wanted me to be able to smoothly transition and take over these things as needed. And that hasn't been the case. And it's just, so I'm a cautionary tale of my father did all the right things, but he just really didn't, he didn't prepare for incapacitation in the same way that I am going to plan for it for my children. So, that is probably as I put these things together, I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to my online information, because I don't want my children to be frustrated, or anybody else. I mean, my kids may not want all this stuff. So, I may be reaching out to other organizations to say, would you like it? How would you like it? That type of thing. I might also caution to say, with some things, I've considered doing this too. Do I go ahead and give those items to the people I want them to have? So it's a thought, but certainly, again, trying to create this very detailed inventory, that can grow and contract as things change. So managing the resources. I mentioned, creating the index. You're going to have, like, sorry, the dog's trying to kiss me and I've got my dress on. There's certain things that maybe the Park Society would like, or your local genealogical group, if your family was based in the county and state that you live in now, or even in another state. I am fairly confident my children will not want the vast collection of things that I've put together. They'll want the family trees, they'll want, some of my research data, but they certainly will not want all the books and other materials that I have collected. So, I am already trying to think of places, and I'm calling them. Do you have any interest in X, Y, and Z? Also too, like heirlooms. I put a little picture here because what made me laugh when I found this online is I have a lot of these little typed notes attached to various different things. This was, or my mother puts Post-it notes on the back of things, but the reality is some of those Post-it notes have dropped off, and so I've tried to adhere them a bit better. But this is a huge gift. Something that looks pretty benign, like I have an old glass paperweight, but I have a whole story behind it and who it belonged to, and I treasure it because I know that story. Otherwise, it just would be a really pretty paperweight that I might not want to hold on to. So the more we can sort of associate a story with an item, or at least a lineage, if you will, to that item, the more, special its meaning will be to, people further on down. I mean, obviously family Bibles, they're very special people, but other items too. I've got tables that, have a very long history and story behind them, and my kids are thrilled. They're kind of fighting over them, but I'd rather that than have them, this generation, they don't like brown furniture, but at least these two tables they want, and they're brown. So, I'm trying to pass on those stories, but I'm also trying to attach them to those items. So like on my spreadsheet, I have the Sheridan card tables, where they're located. So not that I think my kids will forget, but just as a matter of keeping my chart accurate, how I want them to be distributed. When I got them, my mother, said, these shall not be separated. And that's why the girls are fighting. And they shall not be sold. So if there comes a time and nobody in the family wants the tables, we've got to figure out some place that maybe wants them, but again, we know enough of the history so that we might be able to find a local historical society that might be really thrilled to have these tables and have the provenance behind them. So, but it's the stories behind them, making sure those stories are attached in a way that is meaningful to the item, is going to be a huge gift to your family. you know, a lot of people suggest that, especially with some of those very fragile documents, that, you know, you start thinking in your own way about getting archival containers, and there's all sorts of companies out there that make these things. I haven't gone that far yet, but I do have deeds that go back to the 1640s, late 1640s. And I know that my kids are interested in it, but we're going to take copies of them and we're donating them to the Historical Society of North Andover, Massachusetts, because it's tied to that area. And plus, they're so fragile that it just feels like we owe a duty to share it with the community. The deed was such that the houses are identified by the owners. So it's not just my family that's sort of mentioned in this document. There are others that were in that early community of North Andover that will probably be thrilled to see their family located on this deed. So you know, again, I may not put it, because archival trends change over time. You know, they tell you to wear the gloves, don't wear the gloves, wear the nitrate gloves, don't wear the nitrate gloves. I mean, I think we all do our best to take care of those fragile items, but I think I'm going to leave it to the experts at the Historical Society and how they want to store that. So there's sort of an exception to that rule. Digital assets. And this is what I mean, I knew what I have, I know what I have, but seeing all the different lists of things, I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. I mean, so this really helped me to kind of get, you know, things sorted, still working through it. You know, you need to think about all of those things. You need to think about the, you know, ancestry.com, family search. You need to think about your social media accounts. You need to consider the software that you've purchased. So if you have a family tree maker, or you've got some other, you know, application that you store your family tree on, that you pay a subscription to, if you stop paying the subscription, does the tree go away? So, you know, in looking at different things, especially if you have your own website, or you're doing certain other documentation, a lot of experts suggest that in your document directive codicil, you also provide money to sustain those accounts for a period of time, to allow your family to either mine the information, take up the mantle, or close the account. And so also too, in your spreadsheet, if you want that account closed, you can just say, close this account in 2 years, or do this, that, and the other. But you'll want to have the URL to the site and your login details. And you know, the details change. They're now making us change our passwords, and they're also, you know, sometimes requiring secondary login information. So if that's the case, you may also have to say, you're going to have to keep my cell phone active for this period of time, because secondary authentication comes through my phone. And so phone passwords will also have to be shared. Usernames, instructions. Do you delete it? Do you maintain it, or do you transfer it? Payment details. So how are you paying for this? If, you know, sometimes with those family tree makers, if you're just using it for family tree, you don't necessarily update it all the time, but you do make periodic investments in updating the tree, you know, software. It's important to kind of designate all of that, so that, you know, if you're thinking in terms of, I'm leaving breadcrumbs so that somebody can quickly kind of come in, read my instruction, and go, got it, I now know what I'm looking for. It's also important to note that some websites, some platforms, do have legacy or beneficiary options that we can take advantage of, that you can do well in advance. So, you know, as I mentioned before, my dad's email went inactive because he hadn't been using it. There are Google, and I believe well, it's always best to check, but you can set up in the settings area that go to my beneficiary options if my email address goes, is not used for 2 months, 6 months. You can kind of designate a time frame. And also to who that secondary person is who can log in. You can set that up all in advance. That's triggered by your inactivity. And when I read that, I was thrilled. So it also said, over time, we've all collected email addresses. I think I have 6 email addresses on Gmail. I have a Comcast.net. I've got Macy. I have, there's a number of them. Some I don't even remember. But what they suggested is, if you're not using them anymore, close them. Just so your family doesn't have to later on. And so, Macy, don't touch my dress. Sorry. But I hadn't really even considered that. So that to me was huge. Facebook, you can also set up those designations, and basically have an administrator who can set up a memorialization or other contact options within the page so that the family has control over it, and they can make decisions about going forward. Because I think sometimes we just don't think about those things. I certainly didn't. And I was like, wow, I'm going to have to work on that. Also, too, your computer passwords to your own computer. And do you have cloud storage? Are you paying for it? How much do you pay? What is the interval? All of those things, because again, if all of a sudden your computer is inaccessible, all of those files that you saved onto the local drive may not be available, even if your family members can recover it. So, I think it's I can't say enough about securing digital assets. And then we sort of turn to DNA, which is also a digital asset. Family search. I think my dad he's tested 4 or 5 times with several different companies. Thankfully, I've been managing or administering that for him. So there was no need for us to transition passwords, but you do need to set a beneficiary, and a lot of sites are now allowing that. So again, and it saves your family member from having to get, a court order to enforce your POA.
Susan, can I jump in here on that point?
Yeah.
If you don't have somebody in your family who's willing to serve as a beneficiary and take over, consider making, say, in our case, the parks project administrators the beneficiary, and the same with any other surname projects you might be associated with. That way, they still can protect your account and possibly even upgrade tests later when things come along. So that's an option as well. Sorry.
And that's a very important point, and something that every source I looked at said, don't expect your entire collection to be taken by 1 or 2 people. You'll be lucky if you have somebody who is so interested and involved in genealogy as you are. And that rings true with me and my family. So, I will probably be doing exactly what Ken said and designating somebody who's administering my dad's surname project to take his DNA when the time comes. Because I think it's, again, he donated it with the idea of making advancements in our genealogical understanding. And he would want that to continue when he's gone. So, but look into each service you've used, do your homework now, get that all taken care of to the extent you can make those selections online today. You can always go in and change them later if circumstances warrant it, but you'll at least, and put that again in your inventory. Your inventory is your roadmap. And, I'm already thinking about, do I just give X, Y, and Z to Kate or Phoebe? And then it goes off my list because I've gone ahead and given it to them, in keeping that going forward. It is, it's also a really, it's a nice way of getting them excited, hopefully, in pursuing sort of my interests and how I started getting into, doing our family history. And they're around the age I was when I first got involved, but a lot of people, so I was in my late 20s, early 30s, but a lot of folks didn't kind of come to it until later on. So I kind of want to make sure that they have everything they need if they want to pick it up and start where I left off. Then I guess my last slide is, you're creating a roadmap for your heirs and they will appreciate it. Just like I'm trying to clean out the attic of my house, which is taking me forever. They will appreciate it that they don't have to do that, or that they don't understand what it is. So by securing your work, you are creating a lasting legacy. One thing I would suggest when you're, I've mentioned local genealogical societies, but somebody mentioned, in an article that they had a family member who was, had a long, illustrious military history. And they had uniforms and medals and all sorts of other things that some family members were interested in the medals, but maybe not so much the uniform or this, that, and the other. There are the Foreign Legion halls. There are the societies around military. I mean, I think you can be very, creative in different organizations to reach out to. The more you can explain, the family member and the family history and how you came to receive this item, and, perhaps that ancestor or that, their military history goes a long way of somebody saying, yes, raising your hand, I'd love to have that. So, again, I think you can be as creative, archives, local archives, college archives, the school districts. I mean, just all sorts of things. They may not have the yearbooks. They may want to have yearbooks for those specific years that you have. So it doesn't necessarily have to be family or nothing. It can be a whole lot of different groups. And especially, I think, with the DNA, for me, having it in the hands of people who are actually leading that project is probably going to have the most significant value for my dad, than anything. So are there any questions? I know I was kind of quick to get through this. Sorry about that.
No, thank you for doing that, Susan, because it reminds us all, it reminds me of a lot of that I need to do. And Tad is going to speak to it probably. He's been going on for a long time about, even within our organization, of our missing in action letter, he calls it.
Yeah.
But Tad had his hand up.
Well, this is very good. I just think it's important, for people to consider, what happens to their stuff after they're no longer here. I'm a priest. I do, funerals. And one of the things I always do in my homily at the funeral is to say to people, because I have them in the palm of my hand, I say, you know what? Someday you too will be there. And have you thought about that? And, and I say, you got to have your documents, you got to have your plan. I can't tell you how many times I've gone for, the setup for a funeral, and the children or the husband have no idea what's going on, and one of the most vital things is that if you have passwords for various accounts, you need to have them written down and available to whoever is going to be the one who's left behind to take care of things. I went and did last rites for a man. He had a massive stroke. It was clear that he was not going to recover. When I walked back into the lounge where the relatives were, his wife was crying. And I thought, okay, I understand why she's crying. And she said to me, I'm not crying because he's going. I'm crying because I don't know how to get into his computer. And he did all of the financial stuff. And indeed, she had a problem because the bank wouldn't do squat. And she finally had to engage an attorney to get all this stuff taken care of. And I tell people too, I say, and I did a presentation to the Wisconsin Institute of CPAs a few years back, and there were two parts of it. The first part was, what should I be doing? And the second part was, what do I do now? For the people who were left behind. And I was in clericals for this, and I shocked a couple people because I said, okay, you're now taking care of your deceased friend, relative, whatever, estate, and you find there's all these magazine subscriptions out there that you have no interest in, and you really don't want to continue receiving, so you need to cancel them. I said, here's what you do. You call up the company or you go to the cancel thing and you cancel it. You don't tell them that I am the executive for so-and-so, because they'll want all kinds of other paperwork. When I worked for the county as the paymaster, oftentimes I have the wife come in to get the last checks for the deceased person. And I'd say to her, I said, go to the bank. You'll have the check already endorsed like you usually do. Put it with a deposit ticket, slide it across to the teller, and don't you dare open your mouth about, oh, that's my deceased husband's check. Because if you do, they're going to immediately want this, that, and something else, and you're going to have 3 vice presidents and the bank manager there,
I'm not listening to this, Tad. I've heard nothing. Yeah, I mean, I think, but these real life examples where, and certainly what I've experienced with my dad's stuff, and he already had the durable power of attorney in place, and has been in place for decades. We didn't activate it until 21. But it was amazing how many places, especially online, Vanguard, I'm still fighting with them 2 years later. So despite the fact that they've received the power of attorney, and despite the fact that, we have produced paperwork on his incapacitation, despite the fact, you name it, we're still, and the reason why it's important is they only give the tax documents, they send it, and it's a secure link to his email. But you have to be able to log into the account. My dad let his logins go fallow. So we can't even set up, and he moved away from the house where the telephone was associated. So, Vanguard said to me on numerous occasions, well, you probably didn't get the 1099 because he's not making any money. I said, the IRS would beg to differ, and every year for the last 2 years, we have been getting dinged. He's been getting dinged. And I said, this is ridiculous. So, like I said, we are a cautionary tale, despite the fact that my dad was so organized. His incapacitation kind of crept up slowly. He was very animated in person, but what he wasn't telling us is he wasn't touching the computer. He wasn't looking at his emails. And it was only until other things started to kind of show signs of where that we went, oh, and it was too late. So
what do you do when you have an organization that gives you trouble, like Vanguard? Because that's one I've got to deal with eventually too. So
the real, the easiest way is if you've invested at Vanguard through, let's say, a company plan, and they have an administrator. So like when I was at Comcast, Fidelity is the administrator of all of those fund accounts that they offer to Comcast employees. And Fidelity can do anything for you, and that makes it easier. The other thing is, and this comes with its risk, you can add that person, but then it becomes income to them too. And then you can kind of have some confusing things. So if you have two people who have equal ownership rights to the account, it's an asset to both of them. You know, I think you could argue, you know, one way to do it is to, you know, prior to the need is to contact, you know, have you contact Vanguard and say, hey, I have created a durable power of attorney in the event that something happens. I want to make sure that this person has access to my accounts, and ask them if there is a way for them to set that up so it's already in place, so that it's just a triggering event that then gets that activates. So, you know, in my case, I've been having to build my own profiles. One thing that Vanguard gets confused, my dad has his account, I have my own account. So they keep saying, well, you've got an account. I'm like, I do have an account, but I need to get access to dad's account. I just need the tax form. Can you send me the tax form? Talk to the Secretary of State. I mean, Vanguard will admit that they're doing things that are in violation of law. It's whether or not you can find a Secretary of State who's willing to twink them. I have friends who work at Vanguard, and I've gone to them. I've said, hey, I'll drive all the forms out to Malvern, which is not all that far away from me. And they're like, no, you have to send the forms to Kansas City. So I've sent, you know, just inordinate amounts of paperwork to Vanguard. Other places are much easier. You know, and these were the accounts that my dad kind of played with. He liked to play the market and do things, but he also has a business manager. So I'm also trying to, once I can get some control, I'm then shifting it all over to them, because then, you know, God forbid something happens to me, they've got, you know, they'll be able to make, you know, be able to assist the family in ways that is just difficult as an individual. So,
Well, you've thrown the fear of God into all of us, I think.
no, you know, but it
I
is
don't know
kind of
about the other
scary.
rest of you, but I'm getting nervous. I got to go check on some things.
Well, you know, sometimes when I fly, I'm like, oh God, it's not all together. What's gonna, and then you have to just say, you know, I'm doing the best. There's a company out there that does something called the knock box, NOK, next of kin box.
Mm.
And I bought one, and I'm again sort of thought, oh, you know, when I get highly organized, you know, I'm in my retirement, maybe I'll start to really add to that. But like I said, I'm still going through, I did a presentation, gosh, maybe a year ago on photographs. I'm still having a really hard time throwing, you know, you've got your A photographs that are just beautiful. They tell the story, wonderful things. You got your B photographs that are not so great, or duplicates of what you already have. And then you have your C photographs where eyes are closed, or, you know, it's a blurry picture of trees. I still can't bring myself to throw those away. Because I'm thinking,
Don't worry, somebody will.
well, that's the thing. So I'm trying to, you know, and somebody's advice was, if you can't bring yourself, you know, because you'll have some pictures of people and it's kind of blurry, and you know you have another one like it. I just am real reluctant to throw that one out. But I've already verified I have one very similar, same people, taken probably a minute later. The other one should go away. So I have a box marked C photographs, throw away, feel free to throw away, no need to save. And maybe one day I'll get brave and I'll destroy them. I don't want to throw them away or give them to a thrift shop, because I'm just like I said, I don't want to end up at the thrift store. I don't want to end up at the flea market. I'm sure my family feels the same way too. We'll just get rid of them, you know, burn them, destroy them, whatever we have to do. But yeah, I still haven't done that, because I'm very reluctant to say this is a C picture, and it should be. So
That's a problem, that girding up their loins and saying, you know, I don't need this anymore. And I think it goes with all our possessions. Since I no longer work professionally in a profession, I don't have any need to have dress shirts and ties. But you know what? I still got 6 of each, and every day I go into the closet and I say, I need to get rid of these. But then my body says, well, you might just want to keep them. It's like, come on, folks, it's tough. It is,
It is. Baby
Mhm.
steps. Start with the thing. To me, probably the digital stuff, because of everything that's kind of gone on with my dad, that feels to me the most critically important for my family. Um, and again, my kids laugh at me. They keep saying, why don't you go to an online, username and password storage? It's so much more secure. I'm like, yeah, and how will you get to it? So I have every January, I have 3 things I do. I update my list, because I handwrite in when I've had to change, the password. Um, I do my medical directive, and I also do, what was the other one? And I may not have to do that anymore, but I have a medical directive, living will, and I do it every January. Again, why? Well, I can. It shows my intent, clearly my intent for the last 30 some odd years. And over time I've had to change out who's got that directive. So it used to be my dad and my brother, and now it's my brother and my oldest daughter, who's a lawyer. And if they feel that they can't do it, then we will find other people who can. But I've taken all the guesswork out of it for them. They just have to sit there. If a hospital will not honor my directive, they will honor my medical power of attorney.
Mhm.
And then they just have to read it off.
Well,
So.
Susan, I don't know how you're doing on time.
Yeah, I probably do need to run and reapply.
What I would suggest, Tad, is that we hold off until next month for your given name.
Okay.
And if you don't think that's enough to fill out the session, we can add something else to that.
Yeah, we'll see. I do have one thing I'd like to add to Susan's comments. Most of us, we might have a backup to a third party thing, like I use Carbonite and I use SOS Online. I know I've got those. I know I got files out there, and they probably should go away. But again, knowing how to do that. But also, everybody and his brother wants to back up your stuff. And that's one of the things I have against Dropbox, because Dropbox started to, without really permission, just backing up my hard drive. And when I discovered it by accident, and I thought, why's this out there? And I erased the file, and all of a sudden I realized not only did it erase it on the backup, but it erased it on my computer. Fortunately, I had, able to recover it. But a Microsoft has a backup program, and I need to get a friend of mine who's a computer guy over here and say, all right, we need to find everywhere in the internet world that somebody's been backing up my stuff, and I need to stop that and clear that, because again, that's going to sit out there forever, and it may have stuff you really don't want people to see.
But a Dropbox, Carbonite, they all have, I believe, if you go in and you search through sort of their Q&A, they do have processes for making designations and figuring that out. I think for me, my largest, what I have all the stuff I currently use, but there were things that I've used in the past. When you mentioned Dropbox, I used to have a Dropbox account that I used. I'm sure there are documents there. I need to go and clear that. If I'm not using it, it needs to go away. It just can't float out there in the ether. Those are the ones for me, I'm most concerned about. So I'm sort of keeping an ongoing list as it's like the pad by the side of the bed. It's like, oh yeah, and I scribble down the next one. And then I will look into, it'll be for another day to go and investigate all of them, but I'm trying very hard to cast a wide net. And I'll be very pleased if I go to Dropbox and find, oh, I did close the account. Oh, I did remove all the documents. That would make me very happy, but I'm going to go and do my due diligence. But anyway, folks,
Yeah, this has given us all, I think, a lot to think about and digest and proceed with. Just a little housekeeping thing for the rest of you, so you know, and we'll send out an email about this. But the board decided last meeting that perhaps a Sunday for these town hall meetings might be better and might be better for people and might improve our attendance online, because Saturday afternoons, especially, and certainly in the summertime when it's good weather, it's tough for people to set aside the time. So just so you know, I think I may be wrong, but I think it's going to stay. I think the first Sunday of the month, or second.
I thought it was the third, but we will make sure that.
Third,
And not only that, we're also going to be adjusting the time slightly to accommodate our international members who, it's, to allow them to be able to attend.
I wasn't sure if we did or not, but we'll check.
I had it down. Yeah,
but
just by a little bit so that,
because
that they can participate.
that's the other thing, is we are going to be next year making an aggressive effort to recruit Park Society members from other parts of the world, especially the British Isles, some in Europe. So you're dealing with a wide range of time zones when you're talking about California to England or Luxembourg or whatever. So we're trying to find a time. It might be 3, it might be 2:30. That's not too early for some people, not too late for others. And again, the Sunday hopefully will work better for people like that, because they're not giving up a Saturday. And for those in Europe, they're not giving up a Saturday night. Usually Sunday night, especially if they're still working, you're home ready to start work the next day. So that'll all be in an email. So just be aware that's going to shift. Ted?
Just one, Susan said, used a good word, due diligence. For those of us who are CPAs and are lawyers, due diligence is the key. You got to do your due diligence. No matter what you do, you really need to do your due diligence. I tell people, if you read something online, find out who's writing that. What's their point of view? If you get, some offer for something, do your due diligence and find out, okay, what is this all about? Too many people don't do due diligence and they get themselves in trouble, and I think that's a word that should be engraved on foreheads. Do your due diligence, and, I'm sure Susan will agree with me on that one, right?
Well, better safe than sorry, so.
Sounds like the title of a 50s doo-wop song. Due diligence. You got to do due diligence. Well, great meeting, and Susan, enjoy your reception.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all next month, and with Tad's presentation and something else possibly to sort of coordinate with that. So stay tuned. Good to see you all. Thanks for
All
coming.
right. Merry Christmas, guys.
Yes, you
Bye.
too. Take care.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.